What is up, fantasy fans? As always, I'm Shay from the channel Zachary Shay, and today I want to be bringing you why you should read for a series that is, in my opinion, a mix of a very dark adult D&D campaign and X-Men from Marvel Comics, specifically like the Chris Claremont stuff. And what I'm going to be talking about is the Eidyn Saga by Justin Lee Anderson. Book 1, The Lost War. Book 2, The Bitter Crown. And Book 3 is coming out in August, and it's going to be called The Damned King. It is each person's right to choose how the world knows them. People who are responsible for everyone eventually feel responsible for no one. Letting her children out of her care was like letting her heart run free outside of her chest. When it was gone, she felt a tightness, a hole, an empty longing for it to return, but it came back bigger, wiser, happier. That is what it is to have a child, Samalee. That is what it is to love. Now, this won Spiffbo 8, I believe, or 7. It won one of the Spiffbo competitions, Mark Lawrence's self-published fantasy blog off. You can see the quote from Mark Lawrence right here. It says, an exciting action-packed fantasy. But what is this story about? So in the story, we follow Eidyn, King's envoy, as he is sent on this mission that feels very much like a campaign setting. It feels like a D&D published campaign that you can run with your friends, and you're given this assortment of characters. You're given Samalee, who is this paladin type character. You're giving this monk type character, and all the tropes are there. But what I will say about this book and what sets it apart is the ending is so mind-blowing. I was able to guess it, only because there was so much talk about like, wow, the ending is such a twist. So I had like my eyes peeled for the twist. And I think it's impossible to watch a review of this book without people mentioning the twist and how crazy it was. And yeah, I think the twist definitely delivered. It made sense. It was a good twist. It was very well done. I'm glad he did it. The only downside to that twist is that book 2 had to stand purely on the character work and on the world he built in book 1. It can no longer rely on that twist because, you can't untwist the twist. It's already twisted. And, a lot of, like, if you have the Lost situation, like Lost would have great plot twists, but then would try to do more plot twists that obviously weren't planned from the beginning. And it kind of spiraled out of control. I still like Lost. I think people are unfair with some of their criticisms, but anyway, this is not about Lost. But I do think The Bitter Crown was more of a 4-star and less of a 5-star. The Lost War was a 5-star for me. I thought it was excellent, and that's mainly because of the plot twist, because of the characters, because of the dialogue. I think the dialogue is really well done. Nothing to stand out. Like, this isn't a Scott Lynch, this isn't a Joe Abercrombie, but I think the dialogue used was always very well done. There aren't very many weak points to this book. The only downside is sometimes the action can feel a little overly long. But what it does really well is its examination of the other. I mentioned that it's similar to X-Men. You have what are called Drauds in this world. Droids, Drui. I think they're pronounced Drui. But you have what are essentially X-Men or mutants in this world. They're magic users, but it's all genetic. And there are certain skills you can become more adept at magic. It is a school, like you can learn these schools of magic, but pretty much whatever your given Drui ability is at birth, that's what you're going to control. So our main character of Eidyn is an Earth Drui. He is kind of like the good Drui, right? Like, through the character of Eidyn, Justin Lee Anderson evaluates what it feels like to be part of a subset of people, part of a minority that is constantly subsidized, constantly talked down to, constantly insulted, and it examines what it feels like to be the good member of that subjugated class. So many times they're like, oh, he's the envoy, so he's the good Drui. And it's like, okay, but he was good before he earned the title of King's envoy. So why is he treated thus? And a lot of the villains, much like X-Men villains, some of them are Drui, and some of them have been subjugated and felt the same level of discrimination. So especially as you get further into the series, you understand why they are the way they are. And one thing that this series does really well, especially in the second book, and this is going to remain spoiler free until I put up the spoiler. In the second book, a lot of the choices by characters that were so likable in book one, you don't really know where they stand. He never goes into full on Joe Abercrombie where you like feel bad for liking them, but you are like, man, that was the wrong choice to make. Like even characters you like can make choices that you think are entirely wrong, but you still understand why they made them. And that's why this never, while a lot of the factor that made The Lost War great isn't in the Bitter Crown, that, that big twist factor, I think he is able to build a party and build these characters to such a degree that they stand on their own. Also, this does feel much less like a quest fantasy in the second book. But in the first book, we're given this quest to save this queen. Keep in mind, the fulfillment of this quest is not the main point of the story. The main point of the story is the characters and that twist I keep coming back to. And it is populated by some very intriguing characters. You have Aronach, you have his bodyguard type character. I'm blanking on her name. It's been a while since I've read this. Alondria. There is a pirate queen. I'm blanking on the names because I read both of these like over a year ago. There's this pirate queen type character. There's this soldier named Glorbad who I loved. I loved Glorbad. That was a standout character for me. And also the monk character. I'm blanking on his name as well. Brother. It might be time for a reread. Way to out myself on my own video. Oh, the pirate queen is named Neria. I'm remembering now. And there's a monk whose name I will put on the video. I am so sorry. But, these characters are very endearing and it is a very good read. If you like twists, if you like a sort of D&D style setting, and if you liked the way X-Men would examine discrimination and being born different, very similar to X-Men in that aspect, especially, the Chris Claremont. If you watch the old school X-Men cartoon, which was heavily inspired by the Chris Claremont stuff, then you're familiar with what I'm talking about. X-Men 97, another example. And less so, the live action movies, which touch up on it, but don't go as in depth on the discrimination factor, it's ubiquitous in these books. It's impossible for these characters to exist in this world without being in some way criticized for the nature of their birth and for their abilities. So he plans to do 4 books set in this world. I hope he does more. I think that this is a great series that could be excellent depending on how he executes the next 2 books. Now, to go into spoilers. So the ending of book 1, The Lost War. So you find out that Mingog was the king all along and that Janius is the evil druid that's kind of changed the world. But there's more than that. There's the Hellfire Club, which Janius is kind of like, he's kind of like the victim of that group. Like he's the youngest and he had some respect for Aronach and he sent him on this wild goose chase. I have some qualms with book 1 in that I don't think Janius would have behaved the way he did in a lot of ways if the goal was to just kill them. But I think part of it was that he didn't necessarily want to kill Aronach because of that respect he had for them. But, some of the wild goose chase he sent them on, I'm just like, would I actually do that if I had his powers and I was in this setting? But man, it just made for a cool story. It was really, really, really great. I called it a little bit before, like the night before I read that chapter. I remember me and my girlfriend were in bed and I'm like, what if someone's messing with their memories and it was the king that sent them the whole time? And then it happened and I was like, I felt so good for calling it. But I was honestly like, it was the part where Aronach was storming the Mingog's castle. So at that point, it's not as impressive when I realize how close it was to the ending right there. Other cool things about this book, Samali's powers, I think, is one of the coolest paladin type powers ever. The fact that she's able to, turn their body's clock back and is able to turn back time, in a grander scheme, but also to the individual or an individual item. I thought that was brilliant. I especially love the scene where she's like, we died 3 times or we died however many times. I brought us back. she's kind of OP, and they kind of have to nerf her throughout the books, but it's excellent. I think her powers are so cool. So in Bitter Crown, I can touch up on this now, and we're going into spoilers for Bitter Crown as well. I thought splitting the party up, really they became split in book 1, but they kind of reform and then they split again. The character who had his limb severed, I found very intriguing. Neria had some decisions she made in this book that I didn't think were good decisions, but I understood why she made them, and I liked the dynamic between Neria, Mingog, Aranok, Elandria, whatever her name was. I thought that was all really well done. One thing I didn't like is the monk character. I'm blanking on his name. Probably my favorite character now that Glorbad's dead. I didn't like how he basically went off to go collect the monks of his order and practically disappeared for the rest of the book. Did not like that, but he's about I think book 2 what did suffer a little bit from middle book syndrome, not in the way you're thinking, not in I didn't enjoy the book. I'm saying I feel like book 3 is going to be a huge step up because everyone's in place. The blacksmith's son is back. The monk character has the brothers of his order, and everyone knows who they are, and they're in the fight and they're ready. And I think The Damned King is going to be a better book than The Bitter Crown, and I'm hoping it hits that 5-star status that The Lost War did. I am not kidding when I say that this has the potential to be maybe not like a top 5 all-timer, but it has potential to get, in my top 15 favorite series. It's just such a good read, and one of my favorites that I've read from Self-Pub and Spiffbo. It was published as Self-Pub, even though it's trad-pubbed by Orbit now. To me, it's still, it's still in the competition for one of my favorite Self-Pub series. I wouldn't say it's my favorite Self-Pub series. That probably goes to Eidyn, very close in name to Eidyn, but the Eidyn trilogy by Philip Chase is pretty excellent. But this is a very fun read. It's darker than a lot of D&D related media. It's darker than the Drizzt books. It's like the cross between Drizzt and Joe Abercrombie. That's kind of an oversimplification, but there are moments where the characters do things that are pretty heinous. I thought Neria's murder of Janius was I was like, damn, she shouldn't have done that. I feel bad. I felt really bad for Janius. But the thing is, the way that these books work, right? If she hadn't have done that, it would have turned out that he was bad. But because she killed him, it was a tragedy. There was no world where Janius lived and wasn't a piece of shit, I think. To really get the emotional punch that this series needed, two of those things had to happen. But yeah, this is an excellent series. If you're this far, then tell me what you thought of the Eidyn Saga. If you read book 1 and loved it, let me know. If you read book 2 and it, some people, I think Mark Lawrence said he preferred book 2 over book 1. So I guess it varies. I definitely wanted to like book 2 as much as book 1, but it is what it is. I think a 4-star is still a really good read, and I cannot wait for The Damned King. Peace.